All right, good evening. I'm going to go ahead and call this special meeting of the Camarillo City Council for Wednesday, November 2024 to order. Madam Clerk, may I have the roll, please?
Councilmember Martinez Bravo.
Here.
Councilmember Santangelo.
Here.
Councilmember Tennyson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Kildee.
Here.
And Mayor Tremblay.
Here. Susan, would you lead us in the flag salute, please?
Please stand. Hand over heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item up is approval of agenda. Without objection, we'll go ahead and approve the agenda, and noting for the record that since this is a special meeting per the Brown Act, the only item we can discuss is what is actually listed on the agenda. And the only item on the agenda tonight is discussion item. It's A, adoption of an urgency ordinance, etc. It's a long, very long, lengthy description. Unless you would like me to read the entire description, Madam City Attorney?
Necessary.
Okay,
Nope.
good. All right, so we're going to move to discussion item A, and Ms. Nichols.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. There are several items for your consideration tonight related to the mountain fire, and more specifically, the debris removal program. A debris removal program with a phase 1 and phase 2 is critical in recovery and necessary in rebuilding. City staff has worked closely with the county as they develop a consolidated program with the state. And additionally, we are responsive to the quick actions needed by our city impacted residents. And so we are also recommending a local debris removal program. I will provide a brief overview of the background and pertinent dates that brought us today to this special meeting. David Sanchez, Director of Community Development, will provide you an update on our efforts thus far on fire impacts and recovery. And our building official is also here to answer any questions that you may have regarding the residents as well. Mitchell Cameron, Director of Administrative Services, Chief Innovation Officer, will present to you information on the debris removal process, explain to you the Consolidated Debris Removal Program Phase 2, the Local Debris Removal Program Phase 2, and will ask for your direction on a potential rebate program. He will also explain potential fiscal impacts. It is important to note that in order to expedite a local debris removal program with the rebate program, STAC is seeking your direction on the parameters for this program that, when created by staff under the city manager's direction and legal guidance by the city attorney, will be immediately implemented. On November 7th, 2024, City Manager Greg Ramirez, acting as the EOC Director, proclaimed a local emergency due to the mountain fire. The City Council ratified the local emergency on November 13th. That same day, the Governor of California proclaimed a state of emergency. Also on November 7th, the Ventura County Health Officer declared a local health emergency due to the potential widespread toxic exposure and threats to the public health and the environment. This order prohibits residents from debris removal without a completion of phase 1. We will go over the meaning of phase 1 and phase 2 of the debris removal program during this presentation. We did receive good news last week when we were notified that phase 1 debris removal would be conducted by the state, and that would begin November 19th, which was yesterday. And that properties with a green tag would be okay to proceed debris removal right away with approval of the city's building official, and we'll explain that as well. I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. Sanchez, who will go over the recovery.
So I'll just kind of give an overview of staff's efforts for the recovery from the mountain fire. So immediately after the fire damage, the Ventura County Sheriff and CAL FIRE conducted a preliminary damage assessment, identifying over 300 affected structures by the fire. Staff used that assessment as a starting point to survey the damage that occurred within city limits. The building official and code compliance manager went out to assess the damage to properties and tag structures accordingly. And there are kind of three colors of tags. So there are green tags that are minor or non-structural damage or no damage to residences. There's the yellow tag properties where there's damage to the residence and there's a restricted occupancy on the structure. And then there are red tags, which are not occupiable. And in the case of these 4 properties, are a total loss. And just as a note, these numbers have kind of shifted as new information's become available. And so even today, we added 4 properties to this list with new tags. So once properties were identified, the city immediately assigned a planner to each property, and those planners made contact via phone or email. And the goal was to make sure that we had contact in person via the building official and code compliance manager, and or via phone or email using the city's available information. And to have a city contact to reach with any questions. Additionally, staff prepared informational packets with a description, the purpose of the tag, and actually even a copy of the tag on the top of each of the packets, as well as other relevant information to assist in recovery. These packets were distributed at the November 13th community meeting last Wednesday night, and they've also been made available at the local assistance center, where we have staff manning the City of Camarillo table since its inception. Additionally, the city has opened what we're calling the Camarillo Recovery Center at City Hall. And we wanted to make sure that we're there to assist affected parties with recovery and rebuild efforts. We proactively reached out to try to make initial appointments, and we filled some appointments again at the LAC and last Wednesday night. We've been conducting those appointments beginning this week. Our initial approach is to assess needs of affected community members to understand what they're experiencing, what they need initially right now. We want to provide the latest and greatest information. We've been, as we've had debris recovery information available, we've been kind of pushing it out through each person's assigned planner to them, as well as at these appointments that we've been making. And the third, we just wanted to listen. We have community members who have been through trauma, and we wanted just to be a resource in any way that we can as a city, but also just as human beings. And so we intend to do everything we can to connect our affected community members with resources, both directly from the city, as well as anything that's outside the city as well. So this team, led by the assigned planner, is composed of members of the building division, the planning division, and the public works department. And this team will follow each community member through the recovery and rebuild process with the goal of streamlining that process, problem solving issues as they come up or even before they come up, and just essentially being a resource and a human face to our community members as they move through the recovery process. So that's a summary of our recovery process to date, and with that I'm going to pass the mic to Mitchell to talk about one of the first steps, which is the debris removal.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, Mitchell Cameron, again, your Director of Administrative Services. I'm going to take a high-level approach, just walk us through the debris removal process. We'll highlight a few items that Mr. Sanchez identified early on, and just walk you through start to finish. We know that this is a complex initiative. There's a lot of moving parts, and it's changing daily. We're in constant communication with the county and our partners with the state to understand where the focus is and how the resources are going to flow and what the city and what our residents should expect. So we're gonna do our best to find that today, but just know that some things may change. There may be some details in how the state's gonna implement a program or how the county's gonna implement a program. We'll be sure to update the council and the community as the situation evolves. So today's our best effort to give you the information we know as it relates to the debris removal process. So let's start with just step one, right? We had the mountain fire, terrible tragedy, multiple properties were burned. We know anytime a single property is destroyed, it's a complex effort where we have to remove debris that may have hazardous waste. So when you scale that across a large incident, it becomes even more complex. Following that, as Ms. Ramirez, the assistant city manager identified, is we issued the disaster declaration, and then the follow-on preliminary damage assessments identified by Mr. Sanchez. After that, as mentioned earlier, yesterday the phase 1 damage assessment began by Cal OES and DTSC. as well as county environmental health. And what phase 1 debris removal is really, it takes a more holistic approach. They assess the site, they look for any visible signs of hazardous waste. So that could be something like a propane tank or batteries or ammunition or large piles of asbestos, but they're not necessarily digging through the debris. And if they identify potential household hazardous waste, they'll then remove it. So that process has already been initiated. They've communicated that process should take about 4 weeks. It's an important step because before phase 1 damage assessment is done, no additional debris can be removed from property, right? That's an effort to protect public health. So we really work closely with the county to accelerate this timeline and get it done, and they've been a great partner, and we're really excited to see how fast they're moving. I think our residents are really gonna benefit from how fast they're moving in that initiative. After phase 1 can be complete, phase 2 can commence. So phase 2 is everything else, right? For destroyed properties, that could be your foundations, that could be all the debris that can be moved down, that can be everything that's on the site to bring it back to what could be a buildable site. And that can even include toxic debris that wasn't identified in the initial assessment. So let's say, for example, someone had asbestos in the insulation, right? Something like that may not get caught in the initial phase 1 assessment, but that will be identified as part of the phase 2 assessment. The county or the state, and if we were to implement a local debris removal program, there's very clear standards regarding how we assess for toxic material and what we do when we run into it. And one thing we're going to focus our conversation on a lot today is just the 2 main programs that staff's recommending to explore as part of a phase 2 debris removal process. We'll spend time on that, and we look forward to hearing your consideration. Following that, or I'm sorry, I missed a step. Obviously, we need council authorization before we do proceed with either one of those steps. And then after that, we have the site certification. What that means is this site is ready to go, right? It's debris has been removed, erosion controls have been in place, and we're ready to obtain permits and eventually rebuild our property. So the first program we're going to talk about is what's called the Consolidated Debris Removal Program. High level, this is a program that would be run by the state and potentially the county. And what they have a methodical process where they go through and remove old debris from the property. This is a program that was used in the Woolsey fire as well as the Thomas fire, and it's funded primarily by the state through what's called CDAA, California Disaster CDAA. My apologies for butchering the name. And then there's a local cost share of 25% to make up the total cost of that debris removal program. And then what happens when it's all said and done is if homeowners had an insurance, a portion of their insurance that covered debris removal that was remaining and it wasn't already expended, then the county in this instance would attempt to obtain those funds from the homeowner. The benefit of this program is theoretically it's free to homeowners. So unless they have insurance to offset the cost of the program, it's free to homeowners. It gets the site back to where they can build in a way that supports public health. One critical piece of eligibility for this program is that the home has to be completely destroyed, right? So as we mentioned earlier, that would be the 4 properties, and then there's a void for some of those other properties. While they would benefit from the phase 1 debris removal program, they would not be able to benefit from the phase 2 program. The process, as mentioned earlier, they do the state in conjunction with county and private contractors will handle the site assessment, they handle the debris removal, they do soil testing, erosion control, and all of that is after an ROE approval. The reason that ROE approval is so important is because the county cannot do anything without obtaining a right of entry from the homeowner. And then lastly, it's managed through what's called the DROC, or the Debris Removal Operations Center, managed by the county and Cal OES. The county has done a phenomenal job running this program. They've got a lot of feedback, great feedback from their time in the Woolsey fire and the Thomas fire. In fact, one reason why there's some ambiguity regarding the management of this program is because traditionally the state manages that. But what the state's communicated to us is there's a few fires in front of this fire that that's being prioritized. And they're looking to the county to potentially manage that program. I'm not aware of that happening before. And again, depending on how if the state were to manage it or the county were to manage that, will really dictate how the money flows and doesn't flow in this scenario. So I understand that there's some nuance there, but it's, I think, an important characteristic in the county's ability to actually manage this program, and that their experience in doing it, and that the state may look to them to actually manage it. All right, this other program is what's called the Local Debris Removal Program. This, again, the programs similar to this have been implemented during both the Thomas and the Woolsey fire. And what this is for all homeowners who are not eligible for the Consolidated Debris Removal Program, or who refuse to sign a right of entry and prefer to do it themselves. And again, with that comes property owners would traditionally be responsible for all costs associated with this program, and they'd be responsible for hiring a qualified contractor. The process is led by the city, in that the owner would be responsible for submitting a cleanup application. We have a whole list of standards that we'd require them to fulfill, and then they would be ultimately responsible for obtaining certification from the city. Now, one thing that's critical of this is we have to set some sort of timeline expectation, right? Because we do have a public health emergency. And traditionally what you do is set up a timeline. In this instance, the county's indicating that their deadline will be March 15th. And after March 15th, if you refuse to sign a right of entry and you refuse to participate in a local debris removal program, then what happens is the city will go on your behalf and they'll clean up your property, remove the debris, and then follow through with the nuisance abatement process. Oversight. One key component, as mentioned earlier, is the city would manage this program. We manage the applications, we'd monitor cleanup, and we'd ensure compliance with code. So as you can see, two really solid programs, and as you can imagine, they're both relatively expensive. So one thing we wanted to explore and what we've heard is that because these programs are expensive, sometimes there needs to be an incentive to help get people moving quicker with their debris removal process. So in exploring a rebate program to help initiate the local debris removal process in the quickest way possible, some things we may want to consider is just avoiding duplication, right? The last thing I think anyone would want is the city to be paying the same bill the insurance company is paying, right? We wouldn't necessarily want to overlap that and allow someone to potentially double dip in multiple financial sources. Another thing that we'd want to consider, right, is we'd probably want to incentivize reg tag properties. One thing we've heard from the state and the county is that while they're ready to move quick, the county may, if they manage the program, they may have to proceed with an RFP process to actually identify contractors to do the cleanup, right? And anytime an organization has to go through a procurement process, that may add time, right? With the potential for mud flows, with the potential for household or for hazardous waste, through a local debris removal program, we can move quick, right? We can allow our homeowners who opt into a local debris removal program to move as soon as phase one debris removal is complete. Another item is we could potentially broaden eligibility, right? When we talk about the consolidated debris removal program, it's hyper-focused on destroyed properties, right? Well, and it's subsidized by the state and through CDA in that way. But if we were to create some sort of local rebate program, we can consider potentially expanding that to yellow and green tag properties to help offset the costs associated with removal of that debris. And then funding alignment is something that we would want to certainly consider, is how much this program, a local debris removal program, would cost relative to a consolidated debris removal program. And then another item would be fair program administration. Obviously, we'd want to implement guidelines that ensure transparency, fairness, equity, and compliance with city policies. And then another thing that's going to be really important is we have to move quick. We believe we have to move quick, right? We want to provide residents with the ability, with a mechanism to quickly remove debris from their property. So we'd look for flexibility from this council to implement a local debris removal program and potentially a rebate based on the specific needs we're hearing from our community. You know, through some of the sessions that Mr. Sanchez has had with our local residents, we've heard a variety of feedback. We've heard some residents who are they want to wait, right? They want to wait and allow the consolidated debris removal program to play itself out because it's less administrative, right? They sign an ROE and they wait for the state and or the county to come in and clean up their property. And in that instance, it's perfect for them. But for someone who's got their plans, they're ready to go, leveraging a local debris removal program would allow them to move a lot quicker. And we need to be able to implement a program to be able to support that priority. So a couple things I want to lay out. Before I jump into this too deep, I just want to say these numbers are really rough, right? With the numbers, the important factor that went in this entire thing is the assumption that it would cost about $150,000 to clean up a fully destroyed property. So that was the baseline number, and that was based off data from the county environmental health. And then we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but before we get into it, is we explored two options, right? And council can provide staff with direction to implement any way they see fit regarding a potential rebate program that mirrors the consolidated debris removal program, or something more robust. So I want to walk us through a couple different criteria for each program. For the first one, the consolidated debris removal program, the CDRP, the way it works out financially is the state and or the county is responsible for 75%. The city would be responsible or on the hook for 25% of that cost. The way the insurance works out, as mentioned earlier, is the property owner would remit any remaining insurance to the county or who's ever administering the consolidated debris removal program, if anything remains. So let's say, for example, they had a $10,000 debris removal component to their insurance policy, and it didn't cost them anything out of pocket to remove debris. Well, they would remit that to the county, and that would potentially offset the 25% of our obligation. The resident, no cost to them. Timeline, date's uncertain. The county's indicated that they're ready to move quick, but as mentioned earlier, there's still some question regarding who's going to administer the program, whether it's the state or the county. And again, we don't know for sure when that program's going to be ready to be implemented. And then the estimated city cost is about $150,000. And what that number is based off of, I don't want to dive too into the details, is basically the $150,000 per property times 4 properties gets us to $600,000, and then 25% of that is back to $150,000. Again, very rough numbers. We're just trying to socialize them and get them in front of this council. The next one we want to talk about is what would be called a traditional local debris removal program. Again, one that has been implemented in Thousand Oaks and in Ventura for the Woolsey and Thomas fire. Traditionally, the way that these work is there would be a 0% cost component to the state or county, 0% cost share for the city. And if they have insurance, right, their insurance may apply, but ultimately the resident would be responsible for the expenses beyond insurance. And again, this cannot occur, I want to reiterate, until phase 1 has been complete. And then the city cost would be staff time for administering the program. The next two items are talking about a potential rebate program. Again, this is to respond to a potential unmet need regarding the cost for debris removal. And what we explored here in this first one is a program that mirrors the cost to the consolidated debris removal program and expands it to include yellow and green tag properties. In this instance, right, the insurance would still be the primary. So if they have insurance, right, that would still be the first thing that applies to their cost for debris removal. The resident, right, they'd be responsible for anything in excess of what the city, in excess of the 25% the city could contribute. And again, this could not happen until phase 1 was complete. And the estimated city cost is $250,000. Quick math on that is $150,000, which is the 25% of the red tag properties, and then we estimated another $100,000 for the yellow and red tag properties and the costs associated with this. Again, we would need council's direction to implement this program and really get down into the details regarding how we're going to administer it, how we're going to identify what their costs are, how they're going to demonstrate cost, and how they're going to demonstrate they made those, they actually removed that debris. All that would be administered through with additional detail. And then the last item, the LDRP with the full rebate. And what this would look like is potentially 100% rebate from the city. Insurance may provide coverage. That would be the first thing that would apply. So if they had insurance, obviously that would be deducted from the total cost of debris removal, and the city would cover what's above that. And then, again, if the city wanted to put a cap on that, let's say matched the average, it could be it could be $150,000, and then anything over the insurance or the $150,000 would be responsible of the resident. And then again, this would happen after phase 1 completion, and then math on that gets us for all properties that we believe were damaged or destroyed in the fire around $1 million. Again, Rough math, we're continuing to refine the model, and we would continue to refine the model with council's direction. The council has a whole slew of options they could have based off the information we provided today. And then the fiscal impact, as mentioned in the staff report, the total phase 2 CDRP cost for the 4 properties, we say it's $600,000 would be the cost for those 4 red tag properties. With the CDAA, there would be a 75% cost share, and our net liability would be potentially the $150,000 estimate. The funding allocation, if council were to allocate the $1 million from the natural disaster recovery allocation to support the CDRP and LDRP program, that would be sufficient to cover our estimate for the consolidated debris removal program. And then again, the purpose, right, is the funding ensures expedited debris removal with fiscal limits and flexibility for equitable program development. And as mentioned earlier, the funds would be available in the general fund natural disaster recovery commitment. All right, I know I went through a lot today. I want to leave for you the recommendations from your staff, and we're available for any questions you may have.
Does that complete the presentation? Okay, very well. Thank you, all of you, for the presentation. Let's start with questions from council. Councilmember Tennyson.
Thank you. Mr. Cameron, could you go back one slide, I believe? Oh, one more slide. So the only way that the city could recoup any additional expenses would be under CDRP, based on this slide. Am I reading that incorrectly?
Thank you for the question, sir. Yeah, that's correct. That's our understanding. What we would want to avoid is any sort of duplication of benefit from the state and or the county through CDAA. So yes, that's correct.
So if the city expends funds, we don't get any reimbursement from CDAA?
If the city were to expend, thank you for the question. If the city were to expend funds through LDRP, no, they would not be eligible for reimbursement through CDAA. It would be staff's recommendation to proceed with both programs. It's very traditional to implement both programs, right?
Okay.
To implement the consolidated debris removal program and the local debris removal program, and give those options to our residents, right? There's perks to both, and ultimately it'd be the residents' choice with council's direction to make that decision.
And the ordinance always, legalese always has threats in it, and that's the abatement process. And obviously, the abatement process would be an absolute last step for the city of Camarillo. And in the contacts you've had with our residents that have had total losses or partial losses, are most of them indicating that they want to do a quick debris removal and rebuild? Have you had any feedback from them?
Yeah, most have indicated they want to do a quick rebuild. We did speak with somebody today who has indicated they would prefer the consolidated program.
Over the LD?
Over
local?
the LD, correct.
Okay. And so the yellow and green tagged properties under the LDRP full rebate would be covered as well.
I'm sorry, sir, can you repeat the question?
The yellow and green tag properties, in addition to the red tag properties, would be covered under the local debris removal program. That's hard to say. LDRP.
Yeah, I apologize for that acronym. I didn't make them up, but I get to present them today. Yeah, that's correct. Green tag, they in most situations, they'd apply for, they would qualify for an exemption. For example, if they just have vegetation, right, they'd be able to remove that without any sort of permits. So most green tag properties wouldn't necessarily need to leverage the local debris removal program. They may have cost, right? They just wouldn't need to apply for a permit and go through the process. And then yellow tag properties, they have impacted structures, so certainly they would be able to use a local debris removal program.
And staff's opinion is that if we do the LDRP along with the CDRP, that we would assist our residents in the city limits of Camarillo in more quickly rehabbing their properties.
Certainly. With the uncertainty regarding the timeline with the consolidated debris removal program, staff saw it as a benefit to quickly roll out the local debris removal program. to give that as an option, right? Even without the potential rebate, having the program available, as Mr. Sanchez mentioned earlier, there are residents who are ready to go. So let's get the program out there so they can move quickly and get that property cleaned up.
So once phase one is complete, and it's already started, then we could do the local debris removal program.
Correct. So we've drafted the program guidelines for the local debris removal program, very similar to the Woolsey fire, and we've been working very closely to refine them and update them based off changes in any changes in code. We'd be ready to roll that out directly following the phase one debris removal program.
And previous councils and current council has set aside $10 million almost annually for a long time in the general fund for natural disasters, correct, Mr. Uribe?
Correct.
Yeah.
And just to clarify that, Councilmember Tennyson, that is the thought in the past, or the discussion in the past by the councils has been to set aside the $10 million for property or city's infrastructure. So in case of a big event, that would cover the city's deductible, I don't know if that's the proper term, through our CJ, California Joint Powers Insurance Authority Risk Management provider. Yes, but there is no restriction on us being able to use it in this situation.
Well, I just want to laud previous councils for setting aside that money for whatever disasters we encounter. So thank you. Thank you.
Just another quick question, though. I mean, we also, isn't it true, Mr. Uribe, we also set aside among our general fund commitments an amount each year equivalent to maintaining the debris removal structures, cleaning up the debris removal structures which were established following the Springs fire in 2013, correct?
That is correct.
So we actually have additional funds after the Springs fire in 2013, then there were the mud flow and debris in 2014, and the damage to the homes on, I think it was San Como Lane. And we've gone ahead every year since then and reserved money or committed funds in the general fund to assist in maintaining that debris, first of all, in installing the debris basin and then in maintaining that debris basin, right?
Correct.
Okay. Councilmember Martinez Bravo.
Thank you, Mayor. First and foremost, thank you so much for your presentations to Ms. Nichols, to the both of you, and also thank you to our entire staff for really the hard work that you're all putting into this. There was a comment made by you, David, where you talked about how important it is to be a resource as a city, but also as human beings. And I think that summarizes what the city and staff have been doing, so I thank you all for that. The first question that I had, it was mentioned in the beginning of the presentation that there were 21 green tagged homes, 5 yellow and 4 red, but that there were more that came in today. Do we know what category those are in or how many?
Those numbers presented are inclusive of the 4 that were added today.
Oh, the numbers that were already presented.
Those are up to date.
Oh, okay, okay, thank you. And then my other question is, do we know what would be the advantages of doing the local? Other than, like, it sounds like there would be flexibility, you know, for efficacy, but are there any more advantages that we should know about? The consolidated debris removal program, local debris removal program work in conjunction with one another. You can't have one of the programs, you can't have the consolidated debris removal program without the local debris removal program. And that we wouldn't necessarily want to obligate residents to sign a right of entry form, which is required as part of the consolidated debris removal program. I would say a benefit of the local debris removal program is that it's administered by the city, right? There may be greater flexibility regarding what we require and what we don't require in its implementation. Okay.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you. And do we know if, I'm also thinking about the economy, like local economy, do we know if any of the folks that we would contract with to do that debris cleanup
do we know if any of those folks are local? Or I know we're not there yet, but do we have an idea of the work that is done locally?
Thank you for the question. This is a great point of clarification. For the consolidated debris removal program, that the county or the state, they would find contractors through an RFP process. The local debris removal program, we're going to leave that up to our residents. The residents would
Oh,
be
got it.
responsible for identifying a contractor that meets their needs and objectives.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. And then do we know, because it sounds like this debris is contaminated and toxic, do we know where that is taken or how that is handled? I mean, it's through the Department of Toxic Substances, right? And then the other department as well, but do we have any idea about where that goes?
Thank you for the question. That has not been determined at this point. As of yesterday, we did not have confirmation regarding which site that would go to
Okay,
as part of the consolidated debris removal program.
okay. And then staff has spoken with all of those who have been impacted, correct?
We've spoken with just about everybody. I think there may be one or two folks who are on our green tag list
Okay.
that haven't responded to us, but we reached out and at least left messages and email messages.
Okay. And in those conversations, and I think Councilmember Tennyson touched on this a bit, but I was really trying to understand, what the feedback is, where they seem to be leaning towards. Is there any additional feedback that you think would be important for council to know in regards to eligibility or preferences?
I think what we've established so far, which is that most people are interested in kind of the quickest possible program, which would be the local. And we have at least one person indicated that they're interested in the consolidated program as well.
Okay, thank you. I think that is it for now. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Santangelo.
Thank you. Thank you both for your presentations. It was sort of complicated to read through, so I really appreciated the presentation. As far as the eligibility for CDRP program, they have to have lost their property completely. Are there other eligibility requirements?
Thank you for the question. In our instance, with it being residential properties, I'm under the impression that the main qualification is that it's destroyed. I'm not aware of other prohibiting factors in our disaster.
Okay, thank you. And then help me out with the math. For the full rebate program, we're looking at $1 million. Can you help me understand how we got to the $1 million?
Yes. So a couple points of just quick clarification, just surrounding the general program in itself, right? Staff's recommendation as written wouldn't necessarily incorporate the two rebate programs, right? The rebate programs would come from direction from this council directing us to implement one of the rebate programs as part of the local debris removal program. In terms of the math, yes. So for the full rebate program, the math that went into it is we have 4 destroyed properties. We took the county's estimate of $150,000 per property. That gets us to $600,000. And then we assumed that it would cost about $100,000 to clean up the remaining, $400,000 to clean up the remaining red and yellow tagged properties. Again, there wasn't a whole lot of science that went into that. That was rough math based off our understanding of the situation and the site assessments that we have conducted.
That helps me.
Councilmember Santangelo, the other thing that, and this is really rough math, we're kind of giving you the highest extent that we're estimating. What's not accounted to that is a subrogation of insurance. For example, if they have a policy that allows for debris removal, then we would ask for a subrogation of insurance on that policy so that there's not a duplication of benefit. So there's a lot of detail that with council's recommendation, if you desire a rebate program, we need to work out those details. But we would take all of that into consideration. So that 1 million is maybe not the not to exceed number, and we know that it'll be a lower number than that.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have. Thanks.
Mr. Gildy, do you have questions?
Yeah, I have So is the $1 million a not to exceed number, or, I know I'm not trying to put you on the spot, and I get the flexibility we need with the numbers. But what if it comes in a little bit more than that? Will we have to come back and get appropriations from the council for that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think we'd view it as a not to exceed amount and build the program around a dollar figure that would not exceed $1 million. If in any event the program came close to exceeding that, we would make council and the community well aware of that. But we do not anticipate this program exceeding $1 million.
And so let's say that one of the property owners decides to go for this, and they hired a contractor who is certified on this, of course, right? How will the contractor get compensated? In other words, will he bill us? Who will handle that side of the paperwork?
Thank you for the question. We're still working through the details of the program, but the way that we've envisioned the program, if council were directs us to implement it, is the homeowner would be responsible for paying the contractor and then seek reimbursement through the city for that program. And the way we also envision is we'd cap the dollar amount. That I don't believe the city would want to pay more than what the state can do for implementing the same program. So we wouldn't envision necessarily paying more than $150,000 to clean up any individual property.
And in the other previous fires, there's some property owners, not saying this is going to happen with us because we don't have near the numbers, but some properties found out that they were what they call underinsured. And if that's the case too, and those that perhaps, don't know if they do or not, there's not that many of them so far, have any insurance at all, will they still qualify for this program?
Thank you. That's the exact unmet need that we're trying to meet. Customers or residents who are either uninsured or underinsured. So if they lack adequate insurance to compensate the debris removal process, this is and they would like to move quick and they'd like to take advantage of the local debris removal program. A rebate program like this would help compensate them for those costs.
Okay.
And Councilmember Kildee, just to add to that comment also, why the incentive of providing, especially the uninsured or underinsured, but the benefit to an incentive is that it could be considered a public nuisance down the road, also a hazard, also, with erosion, the necessity of erosion control, a debris flow. So with all that into consideration, we do want to provide an opportunity for our residents to move quickly. And for those that have unmet needs, why we're recommending a rebate program, because of all of those issues that do come with not removing debris or not moving in that direction. So again, we have two programs, the CDRP, which may be implemented, might take some time to be implemented, and the local debris removal program that may be implemented upon, right away. The rebate program then is something that would be in addition to if the council wishes to provide local assistance to its residents.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay, so,
Could I ask one more quick question,
sure, and then I'll go ahead
please?
and ask my questions.
All right.
Councilmember Tennyson.
I want to know the difference between the partial rebate and the full rebate, benefits to our residents between those two programs.
Thank you for the question. We tried to pair two extremes, right, in that the partial rebate program is designed to mirror the CDRP or the city's cost for administering the CDRP, and that's why we provided the 25% cost share. And then on the full rebate would be as making on the other extreme, where the rebate would cover the entire cost for that debris removal program. But it's council's will. They could pick 50%, right? Maybe the city covers 50% of the program. There's a whole scale within that 25 to 100% rebate program.
And we know at least one resident that wants to go the CDRP, so there's no impact to the city finances whatsoever for that one.
For that one resident who would elect to
participate in the CDRP. We're still working through the details, but the city's potential obligation would be 25% of the
Okay.
cost of that program.
And then our decision is based anywhere on the partial rebate of 25% to the full rebate of 100% for the full LDRP partial and the
Yeah,
LDRP full.
with one slight caveat, if the council's will is to not facilitate a rebate program at all, then we wouldn't implement a rebate program. That would be 0%. And in that case, for residents who proceeded with a local debris removal program, they would be responsible for the costs associated with that, with removing debris.
Thank you, Mayor.
Sure. I mean, really, logically, so a couple of questions. I mean, logically, it seems to me that what we're being asked to do here is to arrive at a series of decisions. The first one being, does the city offer an LDRP in addition to the CDRP, correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mayor.
And then if the answer to that is yes, then what form of LDRP do we offer? In other words, you switch the slides. Either a straight LDRP, I'll just call it straight LDRP, the LDRP partial rebate, or the LDRP full rebate, right?
Yes, Mayor, that's correct.
Okay. If we select the LDRP full rebate, can we place a maximum cap on the city rebate for an individual property?
Yes, Mayor, that's correct. And I think staff would suggest that to mirror the consolidated removal program cost.
Okay, can we place a maximum cap for the entire program? And I believe that your answer to that was yes. In other words, it would be $1 million cap, right?
Up to.
Yes, that's correct.
1 million. Somebody said 2.
Oh, no, up to.
Oh,
$1
up to $1 million,
was
right.
Was what staff said.
Could we also determine not to offer the LDRP full rebate program for a property owner who, for one reason or another, doesn't want to meet the March 15 deadline relative to nuisance abatement proceedings? There's a slide, can you go back? There's a slide that I wanted to be sure I understood. No, I'm sorry, keep on going. Oh, no, one more. Okay. Under LDRP Phase 2 deadlines, cleanup must be completed by March 15, 2025, or the property may be declared a public nuisance. So hypothetically, what happens if a property owner says, I want to do the LDRP in whatever form that is? And we say, fine, proceed. And then for one reason or another, there's some delay. The property owner, for whatever reason, doesn't get it done in time, and the city is forced to initiate a nuisance abatement process, because this is also a public health issue relative to the debris removal. What do we do in that instance?
Thank you for the question, Mayor. I think we need to work closely with the city attorney's office just to.
If you wanted me I think also the ordinance itself for the LDRP has timelines. So you have to apply and it mimics the consolidated program. So you have to apply by January 13th and have your cleanup done by March 15th. So if they don't follow those, then they.
Right, in fact, I didn't even include the front end part of it, but I guess what I'm getting at is, if we offer an LDRP rebate, either partial or full, and the property owner says to the city, well, I want to do that, but then doesn't follow the timelines, must we still offer that rebate, or do we then suggest to them, well, you should do the CDRP program?
They'd be stuck with the same timelines with CDRP, isn't that correct? Aren't we mimicking their process?
Yeah, are we mimicking the timeline from a nuisance abatement standpoint?
You know, to be honest, I think we need to explore that again. This is evolving rather quickly in terms of the administration of the program. I think this specific question is something that staff could explore as part of the program development guidelines. If council has specific direction as it relates to, for example, if you'd want to incentivize or provide a rebate for
for individuals in those circumstances. And I would encourage council to provide that direction, and assuming that it's legal and in line with city policy and guidelines, and we could certainly implement that at council's direction. But it's hard to say. There's a lot of nuance in that
Right.
in that question.
Yeah, and before I go further, can I just say ditto to Councilmember Martinez Bravo's thank you to staff, because you've been doing an awful lot of work in a very short period of time, and I recognize that this is really, there's a lot of nuance to this. I guess my concern from a policy standpoint, it would be, if we decide to go with some form of LDRP, either partial or full rebate, and then the property owner says, and there's a bunch of reasons to do that, including an acceleration of the recovery process, but then all of a sudden the property owner says, I'm not gonna do that, or I'm not gonna cooperate relative to that, for whatever reason. Under that hypothetical, then I would be concerned that the city is putting forth funds under the rebate, but not getting the cooperation from the property owner. So I want some kind of, I would really appreciate from a policy standpoint, some sort of guardrails in that situation, in the unlikely event it were to arise. I'm only thinking of this hypothetically. So, Councilmember Tennyson, looks like you got something on your mind, then I was gonna continue.
I do. Since this is they have to submit their fees to the city, and if they don't do it in time, we don't spend the money. Is that correct? Am I understanding that this is going to be them paying in advance and submitting to the city for recumbrance or whatever? So maybe that addresses the mayor's concern. Am I right?
Thank you. I think that is the type of considerations and direction we want the council to give us, because with that in mind, when we write the details for the program, we would make that very clear. And it also tells me that no money's coming from the city until we're complete, and as long as it's done during that timeline. Again, we want to incentivize for public health reasons, and also to help our residents who, are underfunded or have those needs met, and why those orders are very specific to that timeline. But this discussion helps us go back to City Hall and talk about the details of the program. So as long as you're giving us that parameters, it'll help us build those rules.
Right, in other words, you want an overarching policy
Right.
determining where we want to go, and then you're going to go back and continue clarifying this and putting in the building blocks. One other question, then I just had an observation. I just want to make sure so for the, Mitchell, can you go back to the next PowerPoint slide? There you go, thank you. No, actually, the one after that. Okay, so if we have 4 destroyed properties at $150,000 each, and $400,000, if the city were in line to spend $400,000 to clean up the remaining properties, that would get us to the $1 million figure, but that would be prior to reimbursement from insurance carriers to the city through subrogation, correct? So the 1 million would be a max.
Yes, Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, all right. I don't have any other questions on it. Before we go to a form of motion, though, I want to pose a couple of questions to the city attorney, and I have a suggestion as to the form of resolution or action that we take tonight. I would like to add some additional language. So what I thought I'd suggest is, why don't we figure out where we want to go from a policy standpoint on this? Who wants to take a leap off the branch?
Me.
Or climb out on the tree limb?
Me.
All right, Councilmember Tennyson.
You know what? I look at the city seal behind the mayor, and the city motto pretty much says it all. And Councilmember Martinez Bravo, will you say it for me, because you say it much better than me?
Las personas son la ciudad.
Thank you. And I think that one of the things Camarillo prides itself in is taking care of its residents. As I stated earlier, previous city councils have set aside dollars for disaster mitigation. They've helped out in the Cam Springs area with the fire and the debris flow and everything. And I think that in order to live up to our city model, I'd be in favor of the full reimbursement on the local debris removal program. But I'm interested to hear the mayor's language. I feel comfortable in that We don't give them money up front. It's only after all the properties have been cleared and the bills have been submitted to the city and they're fully ready to rebuild that we're gonna spend any kind of public monies on it. I too want to commend staff. The mayor and I went out a week and a day ago or so and talked to several residents, some with total loss, some with almost total loss. And every one of them told us that a city staff member, and I'm gonna say it's from Mr. Sanchez's department, had already been out to visit them, give them materials, share with them the community meeting we had last Wednesday night, and everybody was super positive. I just wanna share a real touching episode we had with a young couple, last house on Avocado in the city limits. Right next to them is the county, and it was a young couple with a 4 and a 7-year-old child, and they lost everything. And the wife was very tearful. I had a hard time not showing emotions, and I asked her, how long have you lived here? And she said, I was born and raised here. We had horses here. This was my parents' property. My husband and I bought it from them 5 or 6 years ago. And it just was so touching to see the emotions of someone that had suffered complete loss, not just from a home they'd only lived in 5 or 6 years, but her childhood home where all of hers and her family's memories were. And I just think it's incumbent upon us as policymakers for the city to reach out in whatever way we can to help these people rebuild as quickly as they can so that they continue to enjoy living in this absolutely phenomenal city. Thank you, sir.
Who wants to go next?
Want me to go next?
Vice Mayor Kildee.
Well, I couldn't have said it better, Councilmember Tennyson. I'm sure all the rest of us are going to have their says too. I do agree. I think the $1 million is where we're going to go. There is precedence in the city for this. In the spring situation, we stepped up there too. I think it's important for the potential property owners to know that this is another tool in their toolbox. We're not forcing them to do anything on this. Hopefully, if they decide to partake in this, that they're all in, and there are necessary guardrails and timelines that they're going to have to do their best to adhere to. I'd be interested as well as what the mayor, from a legal standpoint, has to say on this. But if we're trying to speed up the process and the timeline, I think this would be a good tool to do that. And I too want to commend the staff and the administration, you know, for in a very short time for coming up with this program. I know that it's a rough draft. It's not totally the way it's going to be here, but I think this is a necessary tool for the property owners. And also, as many of you know, I grew up in that area. I know quite a few people that are impacted by this, and this would be a really good gesture to help those that are in our city to expedite a very tragic event. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Councilmember Santangelo.
Thank you. Councilmember Tennyson, you put things so well. It's really hard to follow that. I'd like to thank the staff for their continued outreach and working with everybody that's been affected by these horrible fires. And I want to also give thanks to our past city councils who have made sure that we have allotted funds in case of emergency and disaster like this. We're really lucky to be a city that has these funds available and has set aside these funds for situations just like this. I support the full rebate program as well. I think we should do everything as possible to help our residents rebuild as quickly as possible and to give them a choice to do it how they see fits and works best for their family and for their residents. So, thank you.
Councilmember Martinez-Bravo.
I also agree with my fellow council members, and I think what has been said were all my points as well, in thanking staff definitely for your hard work. I know messages were being sent at 5 in the morning and then again at midnight. It was nonstop, and I know how hard you have all been working. I also wanted to thank previous councils for truly making some very smart fiduciary policy decisions. And the fact that we are financially stable and we can provide this to our community, I think is very important. And I do also support the full rebate. Not only are we helping the individual homeowners who lost everything, but the reality is that this is also a public health issue. And so I'm also interested in maybe discussing some of those boundaries that we can set in terms of the timeline so that we can ensure that whatever cleanup is done within that limited amount of time so it can be done the right way and not have a negative public health impact overall.
Okay. I'm in full agreement with my council colleagues on this. I think Councilmember Tennyson was eloquent in articulating why we should do the full LDRP, why we should select that option. A couple of additional comments for the record. Number one, there is, in my view, precedent which is similar in many respects, and it came out in my questioning before. We had the Springs fire in May of 2013, and that was followed in, I think, a year and a half later in December 2014 by the terrible mud flows from rains in Camarillo Springs.
Halloween night.
And it was, so the city council at that point not only took general fund monies to spend to install well, first of all, I think there were, if I remember correctly, there were 16 homes damaged in that incident. 10 homes were uninhabitable. I think they were mostly all on San Como Lane, but I don't remember for sure. It was in that, it was on San Como Lane in that general area. But the council went ahead and spent, I don't know how much money, spent a great deal of money to install that debris barrier. I don't want to put Mr. Uribe on the spot. I just don't, or Mr. Klotz, I just don't remember how much that was, but I know it was a very significant amount of money. And in addition to that, we put aside each year, I think $200,000. We make a commitment of $200,000 of general fund money to maintain that debris barrier so those homes won't be damaged again. So I think we have similar precedent in many respects based on that for doing a full LDRP option here. The one thing that I want to kind of highlight, on the bottom of page 4 of 6 of the staff report, it says, it's important to note that this program will require further definition to ensure proper administration and compliance with city policies, and that's what you've been talking about. And again, I really appreciate all of your hard work on this. But I want to quote the next sentence. If the council wishes to proceed through a separate recommendation, the city council can authorize the city manager in coordination with the city attorney to establish the program. This, and then it goes on to say, this allows staff to finalize program guidelines, eligibility criteria, and distribution procedures, ensuring the program is legally sound, transparent, and effective in supporting expedited cleanup efforts. Do you have the PowerPoint slide with the recommended form of motion? What I would like to do is, I think whatever motion we take, and I think you've got unanimity from the 5 of us, and I think you've heard some guardrails that we're in consensus on some guardrails here. Under number 5, it would be in addition to authorizing the allocation of a not to exceed $1 million of the general fund commitment of fund balance, we would add to that the language that I just read at the bottom of page 4 that would authorize the city manager in coordination with the city attorney to establish the program and allow staff to finalize program guidelines, et cetera. What I just read, and add that to number 5 in the recommendation. And we would also add language that would say in number 5 that as a city council, we find that assisting these property owners who are affected, these property owners who are affected with homes damaged through no fault of their own should receive assistance from the city, that is of benefit to the city based on public health and other reasons that I think were articulated during this meeting, and it is not a gift of public funds. What I would like to do is add that language in some form, who somebody can articulate better than I, probably the city attorney, I think, on that, into number 5. And Madam City Attorney, could you just speak briefly as to my issue relative to gift of public funds, so we can
Yes,
button up that issue?
certainly. Yeah, you've brought up a good point, and I'm glad we can have this discussion. So this is on the record.
Right.
And so if there's ever any discussion or concerns about whether this was considered by the council to be consistent with the use of public funds. So the Constitution does prohibit the gift of public funds. In general, though, cities are allowed to expend funds that benefit individuals, private individuals, more than others, provided that that use of funds has a public purpose, public benefit. And I think what we've heard here tonight is that clearly there's a clear public health issue
Right.
that we're trying to address to avoid the debris flows. Also, just to address the community at large, to address that there has been a natural disaster that has occurred through no fault of any of these property owners, and that the city is a steward of the community. It's appropriate to use public funds to enable those properties to be rehabilitated, because that is a benefit to the community at large.
Right. Thank you, Rachel. And certainly, I would agree with all of what you just articulated. If someone were to offer a motion, then I would ask that we add the language that we've been discussing to item number 5.
Okay.
And also clarify that number 5 also, we are selecting the full LDRP option, in addition, of course, to the CDRP.
Mayor, I had a question regarding the addition of the first part for number 5.
Right.
You talked about to authorize the city manager. Is that in addition to what was already stated on number 2? Or maybe I didn't understand that language completely.
It would be in addition to what's already in number 2.
Okay, and are we replicating what you're saying? Because you said it's authorized the city manager and the city attorney? Is that what you're adding?
Yes. I'm adding the language that's at the bottom of page 4 of 6 of the staff report, because that language, in essence, said, well, if the council wants to proceed through a separate recommendation, the city council can authorize the city manager to do X, Y, and Z. I don't think that was, the way I read it, I didn't think it was necessarily built into number 2, and it had to be added to number 5.
Oh, I see it now. Okay, I agree.
So, but if you ask me to go back and form the motion, articulate the motion again, I'm probably going to fail miserably, but I think you've got the gist
Yeah, and I think
of it.
we've heard it on the record, so if someone wants to make a motion, consistent with the mayor's discussion and comments.
I'd like to make a motion with the addendums that the mayor has added to number 5 on the staff's recommendations.
And I can second that.
And that would be, just to clarify, that would be all of the recommended actions 1 through 6 with that addendum to number 5?
Correct.
And the second agrees with that?
Yes.
All right, any other discussion?
And I guess I would just say
Rachel.
clearly that number 5, that the council has determined that this is not a gift of public funds, as permitted, it is for a public purpose.
Right, when we find that we are finding on the basis of the staff report and the discussion tonight that we are assisting property owners with homes damaged through no fault of their own, should be receiving this assistance, and it's a benefit to the community. Okay. Any other questions? Vice Mayor Kildee?
Just a procedural question. If in fact this does pass, how long will it take staff to come back with the necessary motion that we're potentially going to make with the changes that have been discussed tonight and the add-ons? A reasonable amount of time?
Thank you for the question. With council's motion, staff would follow up with additional reporting, but staff would administer the program based off the guidance, or develop and administer the program based off the guidance that this council's provided today.
And
Right,
will we see the final, before will council get a copy of the final?
The final program guidelines wouldn't necessarily return to council, and the reason behind that is a need to move quickly, right, and to incentivize behavior or to incentivize participants in the program. But the program guidelines would be potentially a public document and available and would be provided to council and would be provided to the public.
Did you follow up?
Nope.
Okay, that's all.
All right. Okay, let's call for the question. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Martinez Bravo,
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo,
Yes.
Councilmember Tennyson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kildee,
Yes.
and Mayor Tremblay.
Yes. All right. Record will reflect that that item was adopted on a 5-0 unanimous vote. We have no other business on our agenda for this special meeting, so at this time, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn. And again, thank you to staff for all of the work that you've done coming into tonight's meeting and also since the inception of this incident. We're adjourned.